minutes or so, and give you a chance to learn a little bit about carpooling, a little bit about what you as an ETC can do, and then give you a chance to obviously ask any questions that you might have. So before we get too into things, just a quick introduction as to who I am. So my name's Adam Arnold. I work for an organization called Urban Trans. We work very closely with Mass Rides on a lot of different initiatives, particularly around working with you folks as ETCs and providing you with educational webinars and sessions to help build your capacity a little bit and give you the opportunity to learn a few new things. So this is me. Just it's always good to put a face to the voice. I'm actually based in Toronto, in Canada, but I do get the pleasure of spending a lot of time down in Massachusetts and meeting some of you folks. So I've got a good sense of what's going on down there. I also have the pleasure of working on a lot of carpooling programs up here and in different places within the US. So yeah, lots of experience, lots of challenges that we've gone through trying to figure out how carpooling can work best. So really the aim of today is to talk about carpooling from a couple of perspectives. One being, what do we, when we're talking about carpooling to our employees, why are we encouraging them to do that? What is it of value to them? How can we help them choose carpooling as an option? Why is it useful to them? But also we want to talk a little bit about how you as an ETC and as a workplace can really implement different ideas, strategies in terms of how you can support carpooling and support your employees to carpool, encouraging them, providing different ideas, that kind of thing. And then thinking a little bit about the future of carpooling, and how things may change as we go forward, both in the short-term and long-term future, and how that might potentially impact your employees as they commute. So what I'm going to do is I'll go through the presentation here. If you guys have burning questions, just you can type them in the little message box. Otherwise, we'll take questions at the end. And again, we'll plan not to take too much of your time. But again, I think thanks for joining us for the next hour. So our goals really, we want to learn how carpooling can benefit your workplace and your staff. That's the fundamental one. Why do we want to be doing this? We want to give you some insights into how carpooling is changing with some new technology. And then most importantly, how we can, understanding how we can support and promote carpooling at your particular workplace. So really thinking about the things that you can do to get people carpooling and accessing some of those new tools. So we're going to talk a little bit about carpooling. What is it and why should you be doing it? What's in it for an employee? What's in it for you as an employer? Some basics around how to find a carpool, getting started, carpooling do's and don'ts. So these are things for you to consider, both as, if you've ever personally considered carpooling, but also to think about as you're talking to your staff and your employees about carpooling. When someone says, well, I'm not sure about how to find something, I'm not sure why I should do it. We want to give you some of those materials that you can start talking to your employees about, so you have some of those answers. As I said, we'll talk a little bit about some of the things you can offer at work to encourage carpooling, things like carpool parking, incentives and rewards. And then we'll look a little bit about the future of carpooling, as we said, talking a little bit about some of the new technologies and changes that you might be familiar with. So carpooling, pretty straightforward, I think. We all have a good understanding what it means. Carpooling, some people might call it car sharing in different geographies, but really carpooling, this idea of an arrangement among a group of automobile owners by which each owner in turn drives the others or their children to and from a designated place. So that's in itself is a definition that we know may change as well, because some people, when they carpool, they don't change. Some carpools, someone drives all the time, someone always wants to be a passenger. But generally, the idea is, in our context, as we talk about it in Mass Rides, it's people sharing a ride to work. Maybe someone's driving, someone's being a passenger. Maybe it's people working in the same location or working close to each other. But that idea of sharing that ride, and being more efficient in how they get to work. Some things that it is not, just as a reminder, it's certainly not carpooling with a mannequin. You don't have to spend too much time online to see great examples of people who've been caught in high occupancy vehicle lanes or carpool parking spaces with fake passengers. So it's certainly not that, and it's certainly not carpooling with your animals, with your pets, as adorable as that is. Unfortunately, that's also not a carpool. So what it really is, as I said, is people sharing a ride. Now we know that it's becoming more and more popular as a carpool. what was once maybe a little less attractive has now become really popular in popular culture. We've got James Corden doing carpool karaoke on a almost weekly basis. I'm going to show you a little video here. If you haven't seen this is awesome. This is obviously our former First Lady carpooling with James Corden, doing a little bit of singing. You may want to turn the volume down if it's a little loud for you. But this is a pretty good little video we thought we'd share and show you how fun carpooling can be. Now, obviously, no judgment. If your carpool isn't as fun as this, that's okay. We're certainly not going to force you to do that. So what we want to talk about is a little bit, if we talk about the history of carpooling, this is certainly not a new thing. Carpooling, if we go back to World War II, was something that was established as part of the war effort. Government was organizing ride-sharing services. You could register at a local office to find a ride match, all the interest of saving gas and saving oil for the sake of the war effort. So you would see these great posters going up encouraging people, help win the war, squeeze in one more. Everyone's squeezing in, getting together to make an effort for saving gas for the war. Interestingly, that poster there on the left is actually drawn by Dr. Seuss back in the day. So obviously it was a high-profile thing, kind of around at that time. As we move forward through time, we lost a little bit of interest, but as we moved into the 60s and 70s and we hit this energy crisis, again, we saw people thinking more about carpooling as an opportunity to save on gas, to save on fuel. Gas prices were rocketing. Traffic congestion was starting to take hold a little bit as more and more people were driving cars. So there was a big move towards carpooling. This is a snapshot of a video called No Fueling, We're Pooling. You can go, if you are so inclined, and go spend 10, 15 minutes online and look on YouTube and follow the whole video of how people were being encouraged back in the 70s to think about carpooling. A census in 1977 showed about 21% of American workers were carpooling. So, we saw it starting to take hold. The first carpool lane was actually put in 1969. So this has been going for a long time. But often, as we see, carpooling seems to react to some of those external pressures, gas prices being a significant one. If we move forward one further step, look into the 90s, in 1996, great movie called Carpool was released. So again, we're back in popular culture. If you want to see Tom Arnold sharing a movie about carpooling, feel free, go ahead. But again, we really start seeing the rise of TDM, this idea of government-sponsored carpooling, thinking more about this is a really long-term tactic that we should be looking at to address congestion, address how we make more efficient use of our vehicles. And then as we get into today, we're really facing the same challenges. Our air quality is certainly going down. Congestion is rife. Any major city across the US, across North America, is really experiencing high levels of congestion. More people driving alone. We've realized that we are now at a point we can't build our way out of traffic. We adding more and more lanes isn't helping us accommodate that rise in movement and traffic. So carpooling is again becoming something of an option that we want to talk about. Obviously, gas continues to cost money, and increasingly so. As people buy bigger vehicles, we're spending more money on gas and this kind of thing. So it's certainly something that again is a pressure for people to think about. And then our weathers aren't changing. Our weather systems, we're facing obviously global warming and issues of climate change. We're experiencing more extreme weather. More extreme snowstorms. We've had all kinds of issues in the past few months with weather issues. So this idea of people not wanting to drive as much or thinking about, how do I avoid having to drive to work? Carpooling again becomes an option that people can start to think about. So why carpool? Why are we asking our staff and our employees to think about carpooling as an option for them? Why do we think it's valuable? Well, I think two of the big things we talk about are saving money and saving time. So firstly, when we talk about saving money, I thought this was a really interesting stat. Obviously, everybody's drive is a little different, but if you take a typical 20-minute drive, you share that with one person, really basic, you could be saving over $500 a year. quick search on Expedia showed me that if I wanted to, I could take that $500 and I could pretty much cover myself for 3 nights away in the Dominican Republic, which to me is a better use of $500 than sitting in traffic. I'm not going to judge you guys. People spend their money as they wish, but I think thinking about money saving as a big option for a big opportunity for employees who are carpooling is certainly something that we want to keep messaging to all our employees to get them to consider carpooling. The other great option, obviously, we talk a lot about saving time. Now, I know within Massachusetts, we're fairly limited in the number of high occupancy vehicle lanes that we have, but where those are in existence, and as they will continue to grow and develop, the opportunity to save time through traveling using HOV lanes is fantastic. This is a little video I'm just going to show you here. This is actually from where I'm based in Toronto. We had HOV lanes go in a couple of years ago for something called the Pan Am Games. And someone took this amazing video of zooming through the HOV lanes, passing all this traffic as they went through. So really showing you the kind of time savings that you can achieve by using HOV lanes and by carpooling. We talk about it a lot. You can save time, but it really can be a big time saver if that sort of infrastructure is available to you. And then, of course, there's the environmental element. Okay, so obviously, for a lot of people, maybe the environmental element isn't the priority that's driving them to think about carpooling, but it is a significant factor. By carpooling twice a week, you can reduce about 1,600 pounds of greenhouse gases every year. That's a significant amount of trees that don't need to be planted, to kind of sequester those carbon emissions. It really is an environmentally sound way of moving around. So again, when we're thinking about how we message this to our employees, this is a great way of doing it too. Using that environmental message too. So oftentimes we hear from our employees, well, I would carpool, but there's always an excuse, and that's fine. We understand people have busy lives, there's things going on. Probably the biggest one that we hear from people is this: no one lives near me. I can guarantee I can go and speak to someone do an outreach, speak to a group of employees, and you can have 20 employees and no one lives near any of them. Everyone lives apparently in the middle of nowhere, far away from anyone. Obviously, we know that's not necessarily true, but for a lot of people, it's difficult to understand, how do I actually make that match? How do I connect with someone? Maybe I know the 10 people who work in my department, but I don't know someone who works in a different building or 2 floors above me. So how do we kind of solve that challenge for people? Hopefully, as you're all aware, we have something within the MassRise program as our ride matching tool that allows employees to do just that. So it allows them to go and look for potential ride matches based on their home location and where they're driving to. And obviously, then they can put in different other requirements, such as the time of day that they need to travel and how many days a week they travel, any other particular requirements they have about their trip. So this is a really active and full database that we want employees to be aware of and to make use of. In 2017, we had over 27,000 rideshare matches within that database, people making connections. And we have over 3,500 carpoolers who are active within that system, using the program, recording their trips, and really making use of that carpool functionality. Again, this is something that your MassRise staff can help you and take you through in more detail, explaining how the program works. But to give you folks a very quick overview, if I found someone that I was interested in making a match with, I can learn a little bit more about them. I can zoom in and see, okay, this is a person who lives near me. They're traveling to where I'm going. I'm going to click on them and find out a little bit more information. Okay, that seems like it could work potentially for me. And then based on that, I can get a little bit more detail. So I can dig in and find out, again, how often they are traveling, when they're traveling, what they need to know about me, what kind of things, what kind of passenger they might consider. But also it gives me the opportunity to contact that person. So it's not forming a carpool automatically. It's really just saying, hey, it looks like this could be a great opportunity for us to carpool. This is my schedule. I'm interested. Let me send you a message. That individual then has the opportunity to message me back and make that connection, and maybe we can set out our carpool and get things underway. It's really a way of finding individuals to make that match with and establishing that first step of the carpool. So How do we make carpools work for individuals? This is the kind of advice we give to employees, and again, something that is important within your messaging. Thinking about asking employees to start slow, so trying it something 1 to 2 days a week for a couple of weeks. Asking people to commit for a long term can be really difficult, but if we can say to people, just give it a try, see if it works for you, that's a much lower barrier to entry. So thinking about it as something that we're just going to try. Setting some really basic rules, and this is a big one within carpools. Everyone loves their cars, everyone loves their music, or something about their space within their car. So find out where those potential things overlap. Is silence golden? Is it podcasts? Is it radio? Think about what's going to make it most comfortable for each other. Also think about having a late policy. What's the grace period you'll wait? Are you going to wait for each other for 5 minutes, for more than that? So setting out some of those ground rules is really important. And then establishing that driving schedule, letting each other know who's going to drive. Are we going to switch? Are you going to drive all the time? And I'm maybe going to give you some gas money. What's going to work best for you? So really helping employees understand that this doesn't have to be an overly formal structure. It's really their carpool. It's their trip that they can manage, but it is useful to have some of those ground rules initially. Going alongside with that, there's certainly it's a very important carpool etiquette that we like to people to adhere to. Basic common sense, common good behavior, but it again makes it useful for people. And these might be some answers to questions that you may get from employees who are thinking about carpooling. So we often advise people who are carpooling, think about texting or calling, as a heads up if you're going to be late. Super easy to make that communication. Just make sure you do it. Doing things to be helpful, like clearing snow off the car in the winter, keeping a full tank of gas, and again, deciding on what you're going to listen to. Are you going to talk in the morning? Do you want to talk about work? Do you not want to talk about work? All of those things. What's going to make it a comfortable ride? Things to think about not doing, clearly. Keeping a clean car. Don't leave garbage in the car. Drive as if you had, your mother in the car, essentially. No cursing. Don't be messy. And again, when it comes to driving carpool partners around, we need to be fairly structured. So no running unexpected errands or being late. We want that service, that carpool relationship to be reliable, so that people can commit to it and are interested in doing it. So that's, for the individual a little bit, but so why should you as an employer maybe be concerned with this? Why is it something that, you really should have any interest in? A couple of really big reasons I think to flag. One is recruitment and retention. So thinking about how do you attract the staff that you need to your workplace. Access to the workplace is an increasingly really important to newcomers and millennials and new folks coming into the job market. How am I going to get to work? We know that car ownership amongst millennials is decreasing. So you need to think about those options that you're providing to make sure that people say, sure, this is a great company, I'd love to come work for you. And I can get there. We often hear of situations where companies are struggling to recruit new employees because they just aren't accessible. And carpooling helps bridge some of that gap to be able to say, you know what, we have a really robust carpooling program. We can make sure that you can get to this new job. And again, it comes to the retention issue too. Over time, people decide that they don't want to have access to the car or they change their home location. How do we make sure that people have access to that option so they're not forced to think about changing their work location because of other life choices? So, recruitment and retention, certainly a really big component of why carpooling can be important for you as an employer. Second to that is parking. Now, parking is a huge cost. We know that whether you are in a metropolitan area like Boston, there's a great headline from a while back. Parking space on sale for $350,000. That's just a parking space. Nothing else comes with that. There's no Bentley that gets parked in there. That's just the space. It is expensive to build and maintain parking. And if you have ownership of your parking, or you are leasing part of your building and part of your lease cost includes parking, it is expensive to provide that to employees. We know the cost to build a parking space can range from about $10,000 to $50,000 per space, and that's not even including these fancy kind of stack spaces you see on the left there. That's basic, outdoor or somewhat covered parking spaces. So alleviating some of that stress on parking capacity by encouraging people to carpool can be a real incentive. We know there are workplaces that have avoided building parking lots or leasing additional spaces because they've introduced a really robust carpooling program to encourage people to leave their cars at home, carpool, so that they don't have to build or lease those additional spaces. So what can you do to make your workplace carpool friendly? You bought into the idea, you're with me so far, okay, you think it's good for your employees, you can see why it's good for you. So what kind of things can you do to really help people think about carpooling? You're already on the right step because you're on this webinar, you're part of the Mass Rides program, you're learning about some of the resources that are available to you, and you've already got that commitment. But there are two or three different kind of really sort of infrastructure type pieces that you can implement that will help encourage folks to carpool a little more. So this is a study from the University of Toronto in 2009, concluded that emergency ride home and carpool parking are the two biggest drivers behind carpool formation. So those two items can really help drive carpool formation. So we'll take a quick look at those. So carpool parking, some of you folks may have this already. Very straightforward in some ways. It's really just the allocation of reserved parking for car or van pools. It might be using a sign. It might be marking out the spaces on the asphalt with paint, but designating those spaces for carpools. Those spaces should be well placed, so they should be really in some of the best locations in the parking lot. Generally, that is nearest the entrance, so that in the winter you're really close to get to the front door of your office. It's convenient, it's close. For some workplaces, we found actually they like to put those spaces near the exit because they have such busy parking lots. The prime spaces are near the exit, so at the end of the day, they can get out before everybody else. You will know that for your own workplace, whichever is the best spot, but really identifying, where would anyone really like to park? Where's the chief exec parking? Probably put the spaces next to there if you can. They need to be authoritative, right? So they need to be able to say, this is something that we respect, they are enforced, these are for carpool parkers. We're very clearly signing it. It's very important that these are for those spaces. And we'll talk about enforcement in a second, but they need to be very clearly highlighted so that it can be seen that the workplace is endorsing this behavior. I also like to use this term that they need to be elastic. So there's really no set formula to say you must have this many number of carpool parking spaces. It really depends on obviously the activity of the amount of carpooling activity you have at your workplace, how many people are doing it. Maybe it changes seasonally. Generally, we would advise you start off smaller so that you build up a waiting list rather than having empty spaces, because if you have too many empty carpool parking spaces, someone's going to say, well, why are we doing this? No one's carpooling. However, if you start off with maybe just a few and build up that waiting list so that there's always those spaces are always being used, and that you have the space to expand that. And again, making sure this is kind of a respected and accepted behavior. So this goes along with an overall corporate endorsement of carpooling. So by saying, sure, you can park here, this is something we value you making this effort. You can park your vehicle here. This is something that corporately we think is really valuable. Enforcement is something that always comes up when we talk about carpool parking, of course, because the moment you create a system with great parking, we know that someone will probably try and scam it. Parking continues to be one of the big items that people get very frustrated about and very passionate about. So if they can get a better space, they are going to try doing something. So how do you enforce carpool parking? There's no hard and fast rule. Something that we generally would recommend is creating a policy and making sure you communicate it. So making very clear who's able to use those spaces, how they can access them, and making sure everyone is aware of that. In the same way that you notify people about other issues within the building, within your office, letting people know, what particular emergency procedures it might be. This is the policy for carpool parking, and it might be you need to be signed up on the Mass Ride system and have a carpool formed. It might be you need to use a hang tag, so you need to come and speak to a particular individual. You need to get one of our specially marked numbered hang tags. You need to display that hang tag. in your vehicle. You might set ground rules in terms of how many people have to be in the car. Is it 2 people? Is it 3 people? That's really up to the different workplaces to think about. But making that policy clear, communicating it, is really the first step in that. There's certainly I would suspect you will never have an issue with someone not reporting individuals who are abusing the system. People who are carpoolers are very quick to point out that someone may not be carpooling and using those spaces. So you may need to think about too, how do you, message that kind of enforcement? And it doesn't necessarily have to be harsh, but I think things like warnings and sort of polite notices to folks who have parked in a space that maybe they shouldn't have done, letting them know, this is for carpool parkers only. Thanks very much, is something that you can look at. If you have access to parking management, so maybe your lot is gated or it's patrolled by security or it's paid parking, that's certainly a great advantage that you have. So involving those staff, even at the outset when you're designating those spaces, to think about how can they help you with that enforcement. This is another designated space in the same way as an accessible space might be, for example. How are those spaces enforced, and how can parking management help you with that a little bit? So that's carpool parking. The other piece is emergency ride home. So as partners of members of Mass Rides, this is something that your employees have access to. Again, there's lots more details on the commute.com website, the Mass Rides website. But fundamentally, this is about giving people a safety net so that if they are thinking about carpooling, they can say, okay, I'm going to carpool, and in the event of an emergency, in the event that my child's school calls and my child is sick and I have to get home, but I didn't drive today, I can get home. I'm covered for that. So Mass Rides offers up to $100, up to 4 times per year to employees who are taking a sustainable mode, so in this case carpooling, and need to access that emergency ride home. So it's very straightforward. You would set up an account through the commute.com website. You'd be able to take your cab ride home in the event of an emergency, keep that receipt, submit it through to Mass Rides. It's a program that really is there as essentially as an insurance for our employees. Again, it's a great answer to that what if question. Well, I would carpool, but what if I get sick? What if I get stuck? Well, here we go. Here's something that, again, you can have access to maybe push you a little closer to thinking about carpooling. So those are the big 2 pieces, but there's a few other things that you can do, and maybe you're already doing, to again incent people to think about carpooling and making that choice. So rewards and incentives are certainly something that can encourage people. So when we talk about rewards and incentives, the Mass Rides New Ride program, again, has a fantastic incentive program. So if you are carpooling and you are logging those carpooling trips, each trip you get, you're going to earn points that can earn you discounts locally. Great opportunity to think, what, it's worth my time carpooling, because every trip I log, I'm going to get, some a little coupon to get 10% off the next time I go grab a coffee, or I get a massage, or I'm going down to the bakery. All these different things that you can have access to. So messaging to employees that if they do carpool, here's an extra bonus. Just log your trip. You're going to get some of those great incentives. You can also do more customized type programs, and again, this is something that Mass Rides can work with you more closely on. But things like offering people a car wash if they're carpooling. This is something one of my programs up in Toronto did a few years ago, where we said, if you carpool on this particular day for a set period of time, we're going to come and we're going to get you a car wash. Really of interest to people, especially if you're driving. People love a clean car. So again, something that might motivate them. So think about what might work best for your workplace. And again, Mass Rides can certainly help you with that. If you want to take it a step further, something called parking cash out is an option we've seen a good number of workplaces invest in. And this is really saying, instead of subsidizing your parking as an employee, maybe I pay your monthly parking currently, I'm just going to give you the cash for that. So you can choose. You can say, I want you as my employer to pay for my parking, or I want you just to give me that $100, whatever it is, per month, and I'm going to take that because I'm not going to park. I'm going to choose an alternative, and I'm going to put that cash in my pocket and spend it as I wish. Something could be done monthly or daily. There's all different sort of processes and ways that you can set that up. But fundamentally, it's about getting employees to understand the value of the parking space that they have, and maybe getting them to think about, well, would I rather spend my money differently? Is that enough to make me think about carpooling? Because you know what, that extra $100 a month or whatever it is, I can think of a much better way of using that. So again, it's a little bit of a bigger step. It's not quite as easy as just doing a little campaign, but it is something that can yield some good results. When we talk about campaigns and promotions, again, this is something that you'll see through Mass Rides a lot. We have things like Try It Days. If you think back to my earlier slide, we talked about getting people to just try something once. This can be a great opportunity. This is a promotion we recently did where we actually, a bunch of us got dressed up in superhero costumes and carpooled. We were carpool heroes for a week for a Try It type campaign. Goofy stuff like that to get people to stop, look at the campaign that you're doing, and then think about, what, maybe I will try it. Maybe I'll give carpooling a try for a couple of days this week. I might win a prize. I might get some incentives. It might be fun. I'm not committing to doing it full time. I'm not selling my car. Nothing as significant as that. It's really just a chance to try it and get people to sort of dip their toe in a little bit and think about, is this something they might want to do full time? Car and bike share is also a great way of supporting carpooling. Might not seem evident initially, but really one of the big challenges we often see for people who drive their own cars to work, they say, well, I drive because I need my car at work. I have meetings to go to. I like to run errands at lunch. If I don't have my car, I don't have that access and that freedom. So providing access to things like Zipcar or other car share programs, or even bike share programs where an employee can just borrow a car that isn't their own, either for a meeting or for an errand, giving them access to those vehicles can help free them up from needing their own car. Certainly something that, again, is worth looking at, especially if you have access to some of those vehicles. If you're not in an area where car or bike share is particularly prevalent, it might be looking at how you can include fleet vehicles. So if you have vehicles that are used for going to meetings or for site visits, for example, maybe there's a way of incorporating those into a program so that people who are carpooling could maybe access those vehicles at certain times to use to travel to meetings or to use to do errands at lunchtime, that kind of thing. Lots of ideas in here, and really I think it's best to kind of sum it up to say, there's a lot of support available from Mass Rides. So our outreach specialists are there to really help you build that program, looking at your needs, your geography, your work environment. So taking all those potential ideas and thinking, well, what works best for me? I'm in a suburban business park and most of my employees drive to work, and but we have 9 to 5 hours. Or maybe you're in a more of a manufacturing environment, or maybe you're in a school environment. Thinking about those different environments, Mass Rides can help you build a program that's really going to work best for you. So they can help with developing policies, with best practices, with new ideas. These folks live and breathe carpooling and this kind of work. So they are always full of good ideas. We're always desperate to try things out as well and get things up and running. So if you're interested and you need some help building that program, please reach out to your outreach folks so that you can connect with them and help build that program for you. We can also provide you with things like carpool parking signs and hang tags. So if you're already at the stage saying, you know what, we want to do this, we know where we want to go, reach out to us. And again, we can give you those carpool parking signs. We have hang tags and kind of get that program started for you. So that's where we are right now with carpooling. Just to sort of wrap things up a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about where we go in the future. And, I'm certainly not a psychic. I certainly don't have a vision and a concrete vision of the future, but there are a few things emerging that we know are going to start having that will start having an impact on how people carpool and the options that are available to them, and potentially make carpooling more attractive to millennials, to people who maybe traditionally didn't think of themselves as carpoolers, but are familiar with certain types of tech and tools and are comfortable taking that next step into carpooling, but maybe not as they know it. The real big pieces here are the rise of these instant ride-hailing tools. So I think we're all familiar with Uber, we're familiar with Lyft. Waze is a growing program as well along the same lines. So all these programs have now developed a carpooling element, which really says, so rather than just summoning your Uber on your phone and a driver comes and picks you up, what you're actually doing is just summoning a carpool. So it could be a group of you. Someone has said, I'm interested in carpooling. I'm driving to work. I'm going to see who's out there that I can connect with. And then your employees can make that connection with them and form that carpool dynamically. It might be something that you do differently every day. So you, rather than just establishing, okay, I've met my carpool partner and this is it, we're going to carpool to work now for the next 10 years, you might be changing your carpool partners every day. You might be, choosing different options because you're in different work locations on different days. So really the flexibility is key here, and that dynamic element of, someone wakes up one morning and says, you know what, I think I'm gonna carpool today. I didn't need to worry about finding a long-term carpool partner. I'm just going to kind of do it on the fly and make that connection. So there's a lot of opportunity there. We've yet to see it really take hold, particularly outside of larger metropolitan areas. But I suspect as people have that kind of demands on all aspects of their life, the instant, I want it right now. I don't necessarily want to prepare for it. I just want it when I need it, attitude to all different elements of life. Getting to work is going to be part of that story. That people are going to start using. So again, being prepared for that, thinking about how are you as a workplace set up to deal with that. Maybe it's not carpool parking, but where are people getting dropped off potentially at your workspace? How are people? How are you facilitating that kind of activity? If we take a step even further forward, we can start talking about autonomous vehicles. So this is really, I think if 10, 15 years ago we talked about this would really seem, futuristic and way off. Now we're seeing that there are autonomous vehicles testing on the streets. There are a number of sites in Massachusetts that are testing autonomous vehicles. So vehicles, driverless cars, as you know them, starting to move around, starting to be used. And we're going to see, we already see some of those features creeping into regular vehicles, but we're going to see the use of autonomous vehicles growing. Now, where does that fit with carpooling? Carpooling is a fundamental piece of of how autonomous vehicles are going to grow and develop. And again, it has an impact, I think, on how your employees are going to start moving around. This is a great graphic that people have posted on different sources online, but essentially saying, the number of people that can travel in a car are really the same number of people that can travel in a driverless car, unless we think about carpooling. If we don't think about carpooling, all that autonomous vehicles bring us is a lot of people sat in the back of their cars reading their book and being driven to work. That's not really what we're looking to achieve. Carpooling offers a significant opportunity to really utilize autonomous vehicles as we go forward. This is a graphic that some of you may have seen before. There's a lot of discussion around where do autonomous vehicles take us? Do we follow the model to the left there, where personal ownership is really ahead of is leading the curve, where really essentially all we're doing is replacing our current vehicles with autonomous vehicles, but we're still driving ourselves alone. Vehicles are driven by their owners, very little carpooling, very little shared use. If we move over to the right side there, this is where the optimist in me and then sort of the carpool fanatic in me is really interested, is the opportunity to see vehicles as a service rather than as a vehicle by an owner. So if we imagine, rather than you having your own car, there are vehicles circulating in a neighborhood and there are people getting in those vehicles, and you have the opportunity, maybe it's through Uber Pool or some other piece of tech, where you can summon that vehicle. There's 3 other people in the car and you're carpooling, and off you go. That kind of advance and that technology offers lots more opportunity for carpooling. And carpooling really, I think, underpins how that kind of that paradigm shift can be successful by getting people sharing those vehicles. Obviously, we have a long way to go. Getting people comfortable with this idea of sharing a vehicle is going to be different. But I think we have some big changes to accommodate with any kind of autonomous vehicles when we think about getting comfortable with someone not driving my car anymore, for example. I'm being driven around by a robotic vehicle. So I think if we can become comfortable with that, hopefully our employees and commuters can become comfortable with sharing a vehicle and using those vehicles differently. And don't forget too, what we understand as a vehicle currently might not be the same once we move into much more complex autonomous vehicles. It might not be 2 seats at the front, 3 at the back. There's all kinds of opportunities for sort of moving pods, all kind of great ideas. It's getting very futuristic, but I think, and I hope you can kind of understand that carpooling really is, there is a lot of potential for carpooling as we move towards sort of different modes of mobility. So, just before I wrap up and we can take some questions and any discussion, what have we really learned? And hopefully a lot of these you'll be able to take away with you today and think about in more detail. So really, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So carpooling remains this viable alternative commute mode for many employees. We are at Mass Rides obviously committed to getting people taking transit, riding their bikes, walking to work. But often for a lot of folks, carpooling is the lowest barrier to entry mode that they can get into. It doesn't require a big investment, just requires a little bit of change in their behavior. We know that carpooling options can really help us with staff recruitment and retention. It can really help solve some of those access issues, especially with new millennial employees. We can also help address some of those parking capacity issues. As we start running out of space or land starts to, parking spaces have greater value. Can we alleviate that need to build more or lease more spaces by getting people to carpool more frequently? Employers, that's you folks, can really play a big role in supporting the carpooling behavior. Endorsing it from a corporate level, making a commitment to say this is something that we believe in, we would like our staff to do is really important. Providing that infrastructure, parking spaces, emergency ride home, whether it's certain incentives, cash outs, things that encourage employees to think, I'm going to make the step, I'm going to change my behavior. I don't know if carpooling is the most convenient for me, but I'm willing to take a stab at it. I'm going to take a try because of the different incentives and infrastructure that's available to me. And really, the future is uncertain. We don't really know how carpooling is going to shake out, but I think if we look back in history, we look where we're going, I think it's probably safe to say it's here to stay in one form or another. And there's lots of potential for that. So I think leveraging that potential, getting people on board and interested and making that attempt to try carpooling is going to set us up for success as we move forward. So that's everything I have to kind of give you on carpooling. I'm certainly more than happy to answer any questions, comments, anything like that. Please either type a message or you can just speak out. Okay. It's okay if we don't have any questions. That's fine too. What I will say, just a couple of things. So we are recording this this webinar. So Mass Rides will have that, and I think it's safe to say we'll be able to circulate that to folks maybe who weren't able to attend today, so people can view it, and you can obviously review that and see if there's any interesting points in here that you want to take forward. As Pat mentioned at the start, this is the first of 4 webinars we'll be doing on different modes. So in December, we'll be doing a similar session. Ooh, flew by pretty quick. We'll be talking about telework in December. Next March, we're talking about active transportation, so walking and cycling. And then in June, we'll be talking about transit. So, as the weather gets cold and you don't want to leave your house, we'll talk about teleworking. As things start to brighten up in early spring, we'll talk about getting on your bike and walking. And then in the summer, we can talk about transit and such. So, I certainly appreciate your time, and I hope you found that useful. Again, if anyone has any questions, please speak up. If not, I'll sort of hand back to Mass Rides and see if they have any comments, and then we can wrap things up. Great. Okay.